Free use of the collegiate church was allowed to the Prince Catholicos for the next 4 years. Since the Orthodox Catholic Church in England had been cast out of the Catholicate in August 1951, Mar Georges had ceased to have the use of the Abbey of Christ the King, New Barnet, as a pro-cathedral, and most of his ordinations and consecrations had taken place in the ancient Catholic cathedral in Chelsea by the permission of the Abbot of Karim. Whenever possible on Sundays between 1956 and 1960, one of Mar Georges's priests celebrated the Glastonbury Rite in the ex-Methodist chapel in South Tottenham. The evening service, conducted by Bishop Boltwood, with the help of presbyters, deacons, and deaconesses, was usually a sort of Protestant gospel meeting with spiritualist elements, so it is recalled. After the death of the 93-year-old Mar Headley Bartlett, Bishop of Sophronia, in June 1956, Mar Georges assumed the additional title of Archbishop of the Metropolitan See of India, Ceylon, Millipore, Socotra, and Messina. Believing that he was now the canonical successor of Bishop Vernon Herford, who in 1903 found himself the head of a handful of neo-Nestorians in South India after the death of his consecrator, Mar Basilius Suarez. This gave the Patriarch of Glastonbury an undefined jurisdiction over an unestimated flock in the Far East, the remnant of those who had thrown off the yoke of Rome in the 1860s and obtained the protection of the Nestorian Patriarch of Seleucus Ctesiphon. Unfortunately, his many commitments in Europe, which included the oversight of the British cycle trade, made it impossible to conduct a visitation of his spiritual children in Asia, whose position had become even more difficult after 1950, when India was declared a republic. They were still in constant danger of perversion by papist missionaries, as well as by Syro-Malabar infiltration into their ranks. But Mar Georges did manage to find time to slip over to Belgium, for it had become obvious that the Église catholique apostolique du Rite dominicain needed the nucleus of a hierarchy to counteract the influence of the Roman Catholic clergy of the Archdiocese of Malines and the Diocese of Brugge, Ghent, Liège, Namur, and Tournai. As there was no chance of borrowing the former cathedral at Antwerp, the interdenominational chapel of the Young Men's Christian Association in that city had to serve for the dual consecration ceremony, which took place on September 1st, 1956. His beatitude was assisted by Archbishop Lutgen and Bishop Boltwood. Nestor Emile Antoine Frippiat was raised to the episcopate as titular bishop of Tongeren, and Walter Joseph Henrik Vandenberg as titular bishop of Ypres, with the name of Willibrordus Clemens. But peace and unity among the Belgian bishops did not last long, for on May 18, 1957, the Patriarch of Glastonbury issued a bull by which he excommunicated the Bishop of Ypres for heresy, schism, participation in magical practices, and breach of his oath of canonical obedience. By this time, the Catholic Apostolic Church of the Dominican Rite had a rival in Belgium, with a branch of the Église Orthodoxe Gallican Autocephale, whose vicar apostolic since 1953 had been a married Olivetan Benedictine monk, Gaston Segers. The reputed canonical successor of St. Joseph of Arimathea and St. Aristobulus, as well as of the first legionary Old Catholic bishop for England, and of the first English metropolitan of the Syro-Chaldean Church in the Far East, could not forget that he also had responsibilities towards the Free Protestant Episcopal Church. In 1958, he entrusted his auxiliary, Bishop Boltwood, with an apostolic mandate to perform ordinations and consecrations in North America. During this tour, the titular Bishop of Thorney raised 3 ministers to the episcopate of the Free Protestant Episcopal Church for service in Canada, the USA, and Liberia. Boltwood, who held among his other offices that of Protosynculos of the Catholicate of the West, appears to have laid hands on a certain Benjamin Millard, who for a time had the oversight of a few Free Protestant Episcopalians in East Anglia. As St. Peter remarked to those who dwelt at Jerusalem, "Your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams." By October 1959, the dreams indulged in by Mar Georges 15 years earlier had grown very dim. There were only 2 bishops left in Britain who recognized his jurisdiction: Marcus Valerius, the Reverend J. E. Basile Corbin, rector of Runwell St. Mary, Essex, and the titular Bishop of Thorney, the Right Reverend C. D. Boltwood. Over in Belgium, Archbishop Lutgen and his coadjutor, Bishop Frippiet, still remained in full canonical relationship with the Catholicate of the West, as did Bishop Enochs in California. Otherwise, the world was strewn with blighted hopes. Of the 12 eparchies of the Britons, Iberians, Frisians, Helvetians, Latins, Franks, Teutons, Pannonians, Slavs, Turanians, Scandinavians, and Levantines, erected in 1948, little more than half-forgotten memories, in spite of the intensive course of spiritual education advertised as carried on at St. Andrew's Collegiate College, South Tottenham, no male or female Free Protestant Episcopalian missionaries, with degrees conferred by the College of Science off Seven Sisters Road, went to minister to the neo-Nestorian faithful of the vast archdiocese of India, Ceylon, Millipore, Socotra, and Messina, of which Mar Georgius was still the metropolitan. Yet he was determined to fight on, for, as he said, the defeats of yesterday may become the victories of tomorrow. A cataclysmic blow was inflicted on the Catholicate in 1960, when Bishop Boltwood heard what he felt to be a clear call to revert to the somewhat nebulous Protestantism of his youth, explaining that his early Christian upbringing could never be erased. As related in Chapter 7, he repudiated the authority of the Patriarch of Glastonbury and reorganized the Free Protestant Episcopal Church on lines which would have been approved by John Kensett and his Wycliffe preachers. This involved for the Glastonbury Patriarchate the loss of St. Andrew's Collegiate Church. The Prince Catholicos rallied his now much reduced forces, and on August 15th, being the feast of the Dormition of the Holy Theotokos, reissued the chapter and organic constitution, first adopted in 1955. Article 6 stated that this rite is not autogenic, but is the direct spiritual heir of the ancient Celtic Church, established at Glastonbury at AD 37, immediately after the Passion of Christ by St. Joseph of Arimathea, and afterwards extended into the Celtic and other lands of Western Christendom, and restored in 1866 upon the authority of the Syrian Orthodox Patriarchate of Antioch, and in the East represents the remnant of the Syro-Chaldean Christians of St. Thomas, derived from the preaching of the blessed Apostle St. Thomas in the 1st century, and reorganized in 1862 upon the authority of the Syro-Chaldean Patriarchal See of Seleucia Sestapon. This rite is also the repository of the mission conferred upon the late Archbishop Arnold Harris Matthew in 1908 by the Old Catholic Archiepiscopal See in Utrecht. By virtue of its threefold continuity and mission aforesaid, this rite is not a sect or a schism, but a lawful and canonical rite within the Church Universal. Accordingly, on January 6, 1961, the administrative headquarters of the United Syrian Orthodox and Old Catholic Missions of the West and of the Syro-Chaldean Christians of the East, holding the Orthodox Catholic and Apostolic faith of undivided Christendom under the jurisdiction of and in communion with the United Patriarchate of Glastonbury, Sertroia, and Mylapore within the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, were transferred to a modest dwelling house at 12 Ashley Hill, Ashley Down, Bristol, 6. One of its larger rooms was furnished as a pro-cathedral for the Supreme Hierarch, the Prince Catholicos, and his patriarchal throne, translated here from South Tottenham. The oratory was given the title of the Collegiate Church of the Epiphany and the Three Magi, and made a chapel of ease of the Ecclesia Vetusta and Glastonbury. The dean of the chapter, the Very Reverend Dr. Dennis C. Green, Ph.D., is stated to be a yogic philosopher and a consecrated priest of the Catholic Templars. It is reasonably certain that neither Monsignor Thomas J. Hughes, Vicar General, Administrator of the Pro-Cathedral of the Apostles, Clifton, nor the Very Reverend Douglas E. W. Harrison, Dean of Bristol Cathedral, has as yet published such stimulating lessons as Dean Green has done by the authority of the ecclesiastical chapter of the Catholicate of the West. His brochure, surmounted with the badge of the ancient arcane order of the Great Pyramid, Aegypto, Ex Aegypto, containing Lesson 2, explains how visualizing Arjuna as the aspiration of oneself, careful study of the writings of the great thinker Dandamis, and daily meditation on the Bhagavad Gita, combined with relaxation and stretching of all parts of the body, will soon lead towards perfect devitalization. The enlightened archpriest also recommends initiation into the orders of St. Raphael and the True Rosy Cross, since both, in his opinion, are continually contributing to the welfare of mankind by creating an avenue of brotherhood of all nations and all creeds. The staff of the Collegiate Church of the Epiphany and the three magi at the time of writing consist of the dean, one priest, one subdeacon, one acolyte, and a deaconess. Between them they carry out the elaborate Glastonbury rite and recite regular portions of the divine office on Sundays and weekdays. The dean himself is much resorted to as a spiritual healer by members of many denominations, so it is stated. The mystic teachings of the yoga of Christianity, including the alpha rhythm of the brain, the blood tide, the lymph tide, the air tide, and the muscle tonus tide, are all imparted on Ashley Down. According to one of its latest official publications, the Catholicate of the West has no connections whatsoever with Old Roman Catholicism, Anglicanism, or with any psychic cult in any shape or form, but it is in all respects Catholic, Apostolic, and Orthodox, having valid orders, mission, and jurisdiction as an autocephalous rite within the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. It is not certain if the Catholic Apostolic Church, Catholicate of the West, otherwise known as the United Orthodox Catholic Rite, and the Celtic Catholic Church, has now got any more places of worship in Britain other than the Collegiate Church at Bristol. So far, the Catholicate has neither been offered membership of the World Council of Churches, nor has the Prince Catholicos ever applied for it. The Glastonbury Patriarchate still awaits recognition by its fellow patriarchates of Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, Jerusalem, and Moscow. The Patriarch of the West, His Holiness Pope John XXIII, did not even invite the Patriarch of the Occidental Jerusalem to take part in the sessions of the Second Vatican Council as an observer. If the truth must be told, the Catholicate of the West has never been much more than an unsubstantial pageant, a fascinating castle in the air, with cloud-capped autocephalous tropy conjured up by the versatile patriarchal secretary registrar of the Incorporated Cycle Traders and Repairers. Mar Georges is the magician to whom the credit must be given for having kept it alive on paper for the past 19 years, always hoping that by some stroke of his Prospero's wand, its 12 worldwide eparchies would materialize. But who has ever understood the Lord's thoughts, or been his counselor? Who can tell that the day may not yet dawn when all the Eastern Patriarchates are reduced to dust and ashes? Who knows if even the Western Patriarchate, as represented by Rome, may be a forgotten memory? Quite likely, the Prince Catholicos has been granted a vision, like that of St. John the Divine on the Isle of Patmos, and knows that one day the sun will rise on the Vale of Avalon, and disclose an all-glorious Occidental Jerusalem. That city which is the New Jerusalem, being sent down by God from heaven, all clothed in readiness, like a bridge who has adorned himself to meet her husband. Chapter 11. Miscellaneous churches claiming to be Apostolic, Catholic, and Orthodox. This final chapter deals with miscellaneous bodies, some of which have an infinitesimal membership, and whose origins cannot be traced directly to the lines of succession recorded already. It is difficult to decide how to classify them, as the majority are to be found in North America. The simplest way might have been to treat them geographically, but instead they have been arranged in two sections, those claiming Eastern origin, and those whose founders broke away from the Roman Church, though even this scheme is not altogether satisfactory, as in some instances the roots overlap. A. Churches claiming Eastern origins. 1. American Orthodox Church. 2. Holy Orthodox Church in America, Eastern Catholic and Apostolic. 3. Apostolic Episcopal Church. 4. Greek Oriental Hungarian Orthodox Church. 5. Byzantine American Church. 6. Eastern Orthodox Catholic Church in America. 7. Episcopal Orthodox Church, Greek Communion. 1. American Orthodox Church. The AOC states that it consists of a small group of American converts to Orthodoxy established in 1940 by an act of the New York State Legislature. Its origins can be traced back as early as the Russian Revolution of 1917. The founder, Efthymios Ophaish, was a monk who had been ordained priest by a bishop of the Orthodox Patriarchate of Antioch. Shortly before the Bolsheviks were bombarding the Kremlin, the Holy Synod of Moscow, with Tikhon Belavin as first patriarch of a new line, elected Efthymios a bishop. He was consecrated by Archbishop Evdokim on May 11, 1917. The Revolution of 1917 led to the migration to North America of large numbers of Russians. Arrangements for their spiritual welfare were complicated by the fact of the hierarchical changes and internal divisions of the widely scattered Russian Church in Europe. It is possible that the Patriarch Tikhon, who had been bishop in the United States before he returned to Russia, may have authorized Efthymios to form an independent American Orthodox Church, either during his imprisonment by the Soviet government or shortly before his death in 1925. What is certain, however, is that in 1927, the Metropolitan Platon Rojdestvensky, with the approval of Metropolitan Sergius Stragorodsky, then in charge of the official Russian Patriarchate, did give his consent to the formation of a group of Orthodox bishops in North America. Efthymios was appointed president of this projected organization with the title of Archbishop of Brooklyn. He issued a letter of peace to all the autocephalous Eastern churches in the United States and Canada, but none of them was prepared to recognize his authority. The ecumenical patriarch consequently denounced him as schismatic. The Russian bishops then withdrew their support, and Efthymios found himself a prelate on his own. Cast thus adrift, all he could do was to act on his own judgment, without reference to any authority but the now repudiated commission received in 1927. On September 29, 1932, assisted by Bishop Joseph A. Zuk, a Ukrainian whom he appears to have raised to the episcopate the previous year, and a certain Bishop Sophronios, Efthymios consecrated the Reverend William Albert Nichols. The fact that this clergyman was married shows that Efthymios had rejected the traditional rule in all Eastern churches that bishops must be celibate. The following year he took a wife himself and retired to Pennsylvania. After this he was deposed by the Metropolitan Sergius in a decree promulgated in the United States by the Archbishop Exarch Benjamin. His followers split up into several groups. It was Nichols, under the title of Ignatius, Archbishop of Washington, D.C., who managed to save Efthymios' Holy Orthodox Church in America. Born in 1867, he had a most varied career. Trained as a journalist, he was ordained a priest in the Protestant Episcopal Church and worked for a time in Arkansas. During World War I, he served in the U.S. Navy, but resumed journalism after he was demobilized. In 1921, he became religious editor of the New York Sun and later of the New York Telegram, a post he held until he retired in 1943. Nichols was well acquainted with the ecclesiastical underworld of North America. Before he became a bishop in the American Orthodox Church, he had sampled one or two of the Volotsub schisms. It is said that he received his first consecration from Bishop Arthur E. Layton, who set up a sect of his own, propagating a mixture of Old Catholicism and spiritualism. Later on, Nichols got himself reordained sub conditione by Bishop Gregory Lyons, who walked out of the American Catholic Church twice and formed an independent body in California. Nichols was a broad churchman in every sense. He acted as chaplain of the Long Island American Legion post, and at one time he was local chaplain of the Maritime Brigade. After his death, a friend wrote, "When I knew Nichols in 1934, he was a sporty old dog. He wore his clericals in the newspaper office in New York, and when he got to the ferry boat to go to his home on Staten Island, I followed him down to the length of the dock, where he greeted everyone he knew cordially with a word and the sign of the cross and blessing. Picturesque is no word for him. He had $1 up on the horses every afternoon, and in a very warm and human way, was very much of the bohemian world of newspaperdom." On May 8, 1934, the sporty old dog, New York journalist Archbishop of Washington, consecrated George W. Plummer, at one time a Roman Catholic priest, who had assumed the headship of a body known as the Anglican Universal Church. He claimed valid orders from a certain Manuel Fernando of Puerto Rico, another lapsed Catholic, but who does not appear to have been a bishop. Plummer took the title of Archbishop Georgius and formed a sect of his own, the Holy Orthodox Church in America. One of his first actions was to reconsecrate three of his former bishops, Harry Van Arsdale Purcell, Adrian Grover, and Marcus Allen Grover. Some very unconventional characters found a home in the American Orthodox Church. Their religious opinions were not always orthodox in the accepted usage of the word. For instance, there was Alexander Tyler Turner, formerly pastor of a liberal Catholic place of worship at Rochester, New York. In 1931, he founded a quasi-religious community known as the Clerks Secular of St. Basil, of which Archbishop Ignatius Nichols became the first superior. It was advertised as being composed of American Orthodox laity who wish to assume its obligations, of which the chief is the daily recitation of the divine office in spiritual unity with the other members. Full membership is preceded by a year's novitiate. On March 16, 1936, the New York State Legislature formally incorporated the parishes and churches of the Holy Orthodox Church in America, thus giving the body formed by Efthymios Ophaish a legal status, which Archbishop Ignatius, as administrator of properties, etc. On November 12th that same year, he consecrated Turner, giving him the title of Archbishop Alexander and the style of provincial of the Clerks Secular of St. Basil. With a zest for life and filled with boundless energy, Archbishop Ignatius went on ordaining priests and consecrating bishops until his death in December 1946. He saw nothing unorthodox in consecrating Frank Dyer in the early 1940s. The consecrator and consecrant were kindred spirits, for the latter had been ordained priest by Archbishop Lloyd, and he still remained, as bishop, what he had been, a congregational minister. It was very much like Vernon Hereford, Bishop of Mercia and Middlesex, ordaining Dr. Orchard of the King's Way House, London. In 1942, Dyer, in his turn, laid hands on the Reverend Robert A. Jardin, who, feeling that it was an injustice that His Royal Highness the Duke of Windsor should not be allowed a religious marriage with Mrs. Wallace Simpson, offered to perform the ceremony. It took place on June 3, 1937, the birthday of King George V, before an improvised altar in the music room of the Chateau Condé in Turin, lent by the French-American Charles Bedeau. Having achieved worldwide fame, Mr. Jardin retired to America, where 5 years later he was raised to the episcopate. About 1948, he returned to Britain and threw in his lot with Bishop C.L. Saul's English Episcopal Church. Then his buccaneering parson, vicar of St. Paul's, Darlington from 1924 to 1937, went to South Africa and assumed the headship of a small and rigidly Protestant body. Many years before, he had been honored by appearing in Mr. Kensett's Gallery of Protestant Stalwarts. He died in the early 1950s. Bishop Dyer, early in 1948, raised to the episcopate another congregational minister, J. Morrison Thomas, also a Unitarian minister at Chicago, by name Preston Bradley, probably the best-known Unitarian in the Middle West, with a large radio audience. That same year, Bishop Thomas, doubting the validity of his orders, was reconsecrated by Bishop Timothy Mather of the Villot succession through Lines. He too earned his living as a congregational minister and styled himself in after years Archbishop and Exarch of the Order of Antioch. For the next 15 years, the American Orthodox Church carried on as an independent body, with its headquarters at 52 Kingsbridge Road West, Mount Vernon, New York. In Holy Week 1961, acting on a directive of His Beatitude Alexander III, after an 8 years period of probation, Archbishop Metropolitan Anthony Bashir received the three parishes with their clergy into the Syrian Antiochian Orthodox Archdiocese of New York. He authorized them to continue the use of the Latin Rite, but purified of its heterodox elements. Archbishop Alexander Turner was given the rank of mitred archpriest and the status of vicar general. Archbishop Bashir set up a commission to aid and assist the clergy and laity with changes in the rite and other matters. 2. Holy Orthodox Church in America, Eastern Catholic and Apostolic. As related in the previous section, the founder of this little body, George Winslow Plummer, had wandered in many strange paths after he ceased to be a priest in communion with the Holy See. It is said that he managed to combine the headship of his Anglican Universal Church with that of Supreme Magnus of the Societas Rosicruciana in America. But this may be a legend, having been consecrated or reconsecrated by Archbishop Ignatius Nichols in May 1934. He assumed the style of Archbishop Georgius and reconsecrated 3 of his bishops, to whom he gave the episcopal names of Irenaeus, Patricius, and Marcus, respectively. That same year, he legally incorporated his followers as the Holy Orthodox Church in America, Eastern Catholic and Apostolic. The objects of this new sect were said to be the presentation in the English language of the Eastern liturgies and primitive Christianity, and the maintenance of the Eastern Orthodox faith and rite for all men indiscriminately. The public were informed that the HOCIA, EC, and A recognized no head but the head of the Christian faith, Jesus Christ our Lord, and that its members were inseparably joined in faith with the great Church of Constantinople and with every other Orthodox Eastern Church of the same profession. What was not mentioned, however, was that none of these Eastern churches recognized this new American body. The Metropolitan Georgius took good care that its few congregations were well supplied with bishops. Although presumably Irenaeus, Henry Parcell, Patricius, Adrian Grover, and Marcus, Alan Grover, were still functioning, he added to their number on November 12, 1936, by consecrating Stanislaus Witowski with the assistance of Archbishop Ignatius of the American Orthodox Church. Witowski took the episcopal name of Theodotus and seized the opportunity to change his Polish-sounding surname to de Witte. In 1957, Theodotus assumed the primacy in place of Georgius. By this time, the hierarchy had dwindled to an auxiliary, i.e. Irenaeus Purcell. Still, 2 bishops were quite enough to supervise 4 priests in 4 places of worship. In the long run, it is quality, not quantity, that counts, as is made clear in a recent official leaflet, where we are told that the work of the Holy Orthodox Church in America is to elevate the interpretation and administration of the Holy Mysteries from the more popular appeal of conventional religious practice to the more serious and spiritual level of supplying the means for the development and unfolding of individual spiritual consciousness. It does not attempt to proselytize those who are happy in their church affiliations. It seeks to reach those who have no church affiliations in the conviction that they would welcome a return to Christianity in its original apostolic form, interpreted in the light of highest reason and understanding. Great stress is laid by this church upon the truth and necessity of spiritual healing. So persons of refined tastes who are repelled by the popular presentation of religion offered, example at St. Patrick's Cathedral or at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, and who strive towards a more serious and spiritual level of the Christian religion for the development and unfolding of their inner consciousness, may be glad to sample what Archbishop Theodotus can offer in his Cathedral Chapel of St. Joseph of Arimathea, 321 West 101st Street, New York 25. Here the divine services are celebrated on Sunday, according to the Holy Orthodox American Version. Services of intercession for the sick and suffering are special extra-liturgical devotions for this exclusive body, the members of which like to feel that they are joined in faith, if not in the canons, with all Eastern Orthodox churches. 3. Apostolic Episcopal Church. Contradictory legends have been handed down regarding the origins of this American sect. Consequently, it is quite possible that some of the dates and details given in this section are incorrect. The following are the chief facts of the story as told after the death of the founder, Arthur Wilford Brooks, on July 7, 1948. In his younger days, he was a priest of the Protestant Episcopal Church and served this body in and around New York. It has been said that he was loaned to the Greek Orthodox Seminary in New York, and there came into contact with the clergy of various Eastern churches in North America. Then comes the statement that on May 4, 1925, he was raised to the episcopate by Mar Antonio Lebfern, assisted by Archpresbyter James and Archdeacon Evodius, so that he could look after some of the various Chaldean groups which had sought refuge in the USA after the First World War. Another version is that Brooks was received into the Eastern Church by the titular Bishop of Iconium and the titular Bishop of Tarsus, whoever they are. Furthermore, we are told that a new body was instituted by canonical authority, by representation and delegation from the Patriarch of the Chaldean Church. But it is not stated who was this unspecified patriarch, or over what groups of Chaldeans he ruled. Thus it is not clear whether or not Brooks found he had to adopt the Nestorian doctrine of the two persons in the incarnate Christ. The two traditions combine to state that on June 23, 1926, at what is described as a business session of the first annual convocation of the Metropolitan Synod of the Anglican Universal Church, Brooks was duly elected as titular Bishop of Sardis, but by 1932 he had broken away from his body, which appears to have been the nucleus of the Holy Orthodox Church in America. Then he assumed the style of Right Reverend and formed a new sect known as the Apostolic Episcopal Church. Its headquarters were at Christ Church by the Sea at Broad Channel, Long Island, New York. On June 22nd, Archbishop George W. Plummer, still primate and presiding bishop of the Anglican Universal Church, issued a statement alleging that Brooks' presentations to associations with the Chaldeans were utterly without merit or basis in fact, utterly worthless and absolute fabrications. Surprisingly, Brooks then turned for consecration to this freelance prelate, who gave him the Russian Orthodox succession, derived from Efthymios Opheish by way of the journalist Archbishop of Washington, Ignatius William Albert Nichols, and the title of Mar-John Emmanuel. Shortly after this, as head of the new Apostolic Episcopal Church, Mar-John Emmanuel consecrated two bishops on September 16, 1934. Charles W. Keller and Harold F. Jarvis. It is related that an American version of the Chaldean Uniat rite was used at this ceremony. In August 1941, Mar-John Emmanuel, having consulted Archbishop Athenagoras Biron, then head of the Greek Orthodox Church in North and South America, agreed to become presiding bishop of the so-called Old Catholic Orthodox Church in England, and appointed Hugh George de Wilmot Newman, the future Mar Georges, as his vicar general in Europe, with the style of Abbot Nullius of St. Albans in the order of corporate reunion. Judging from Mar Georges's recollections, Mar-John Emmanuel must have been a kindly but somewhat eccentric prelate, with very broad views on ecclesiastical jurisdiction. Later on, he was granted the style of titular Archbishop of Ebbsfleet in the Catholicate of the West. On October 13, 1946, he consecrated at New York a former liberal Catholic priest named Herman F. Abinga, who became known as Mar Philippus, Bishop of Amerfort of the Eastern Apostolic Episcopal Church, first missionary bishop for Holland and Indonesia, attached to the Catholicate of the West, HQ London. He issued a leaflet in which he explained that his sect was a perfectly regular but independent Western branch of the Eastern One Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. This little body, with its headquarters in the Netherlands, was said to have evolved from the American Apostolic Episcopal Church, which could trace its roots to the first independent branch, 4th century, of the ancient church in Chaldea. He stated that the EAEC strives as much as possible to approach to the original Christendom without losing sight of the demands of modern culture and science, and adapts itself according to Eastern custom to national needs and circumstances. Its chief aim is nobility of soul through the mystical living out of the mysteries and the bearing of them out into the outer world. The charismatic gifts of the Holy Ghost are highly esteemed, especially the gift of healing. It stands for world peace and commemorates also individually the dead, and especially the souls of those who cruelly lost their bodies in the last war turmoil. Moreover, Mar Philippus could snap his fingers at Monsignor Rinkel, Archbishop of Utrecht, and the rest of the old Catholic hierarchy in Holland, also Monsignor Vriend, and Dutch presiding bishop of the liberal Catholic Church, for none of them could claim that their apostolic plenipotentiary powers had been given them by the apostles Peter and Paul, Thomas and Bartholomew, through the Syrian Chaldean, the Syrian Malabar, the Syrian Antiochian, and the Armenian channels of apostolic succession. Right down through the 126 patriarchs of Antioch known to history, Mar Philippus was convinced that his little body, for the moment concentrated within the Utrecht province, would soon become a refuge for all who in post-war Holland and Indonesia have orientated themselves religiously, but who for church historical right show friendship to Islam, as the Eastern Patriarchs, during more than a 2,000 years long Mohammedan overlordship, set the example and often lived on good terms with the caliphs. But few persons in Holland, and still less in Indonesia after it became a republic in 1950, were greatly interested in the EAEC, and not many applied for membership by writing to its headquarters at Annapollonalan 5, Amersfoort. Mar John Emanuel, titular Archbishop of Ebbsfleet, Isle of Thanet, Kent, living on Long Island, New York, was granted the status of Exarch of the Catholicate of the West in the United States. From reasons which are not clear, his Apostolic Christian Fellowship of Los Angeles, California, which remained under Archbishop de Ortega Maxi, Mar David I, Patriarch of Malaga, until he joined the Universalist Church of America in 1951. The united body retained the name of Apostolic Episcopal Church, adding Province of the West, but the union does not appear to have lasted very long. According to Mar Georgius, Mar John Emanuel was a man of great sympathy and understanding, and very learned in the ancient customs of the Eastern churches. This erudition evidently enabled the exarch to find canonical reasons for having a wife. His widow, Mrs. Jane Naglo Brooks, and his daughter, Miss Margaret Ellen Brooks, both survived his death on July 7, 1948. Mar John Emanuel had always regarded his jurisdiction as cosmic, in which respect his only rival on earth was the Universal Patriarch Banks of East Molesey, England. After his death, the three virtually independent groups of the Apostolic Episcopal Church became independent in fact, because they could not agree on a primate. On July 24, 1948, Mar Matthew, titular Bishop of Hawaii, auxiliary to the Patriarchal Throne of Malaga, wrote from California to notify Dr. Fisher, Primate of all England, that Mar David I, Archbishop of the West and Patriarch of Malaga, would be solemnly enthroned as presiding bishop of the Apostolic Episcopal Church at the coming synod, and to ask remembrance in his prayers. Mar David I resigned both his patriarchal and primatial status 3 years later, and as stated already, took on the less onerous duties of pastor of the Free Universalist Church in Los Angeles. He was succeeded as primate by Bishop Jarvis. Mar Philippus Abinga took over the duties of Primate of Europe and still holds this status. On May 31, 1953, he consecrated P.H. Cederholm in Oslo, giving him the title and rank of Mar Nicholas, Bishop for Scandinavia in the Chaldean Ecumenical Succession. It is stated that the province of the Apostolic Episcopal Church, Eastern, in Western Europe, was congregations in Holland, Norway, Sweden, France, and Hungary, but no statistics of their numbers are forthcoming. Greek Oriental Hungarian Orthodox Church. About 1925, the Archbishop of Ipek, Metropolitan of Belgrade and Karlovci, the Serbian Patriarch, announced his intention to extend his jurisdiction to Hungary and to send a bishop to Bucharest. The Orthodox Hungarians protested and, backed up by the government, appealed to the Patriarch of Constantinople, but he was unwilling to interfere. About 9 years later, a priest named Stephen Nemeth had obtained the support of a sufficient number of clergy and laity to enable him to form an independent Hungarian Orthodox Church. He went to Syria and, on September 23, 1934, was consecrated by the Jacobite Patriarch, Mar Ignatius Ephrem I. The result of this irregular consecration was that Nemeth was excommunicated by both Belgrade and Constantinople. Some of his never very numerous followers emigrated to North America. At the time of writing, a former priest of the American Catholic Church, Velat succession, one Stefan Boros, styles himself a bishop of the Hungarian Greek Catholic Church in New York. Another independent Hungarian prelate, Imre Joseph Fekete, with the style of titular Bishop of Munkacs, acting supreme pontiff of the Hungarian Eastern Church in exile, turned up in England some years ago, begging alms on behalf of his fellow countrymen in exile, but his origins remain uncertain. 5. Byzantine American Church. Early in the present century, a Catholic Melkite priest named Anthony Anid was acting as secretary to Archbishop Sawaya of Beirut. He was sent to the United States, where he worked in one of the Melkite parishes in New York. In 1911, Archbishop Sawaya decided to visit his co-religionists in North America, but Pius X refused him permission. In spite of this, the Archbishop sailed for New York, where he stayed with his former secretary. In after years, Anid produced documentary evidence that Sawaya had consecrated him as his auxiliary bishop, and also nominated him as exarch for the Melkites in North America. If this is true, then the act would be highly irregular, not to say schismatic, having been performed without either episcopal witnesses or papal permission. However, it was not until about 1942, after Anid had broken off all relations with the Holy See, and after the death of Sawaya, that he put forth his claim to be a bishop. He formed what he called the Byzantine American Church, which he described as an autocephalous body, had it incorporated in California in 1944, and styled himself Patriarch President, Federated Independent Catholic and Orthodox Churches in the United States. His flock consisted mainly of groups of Syrians in and around San Francisco. By this time, Anid had succumbed to the predominating ethos of the independent bishops in California and had become a very broad-minded churchman. In 1945, with the assistance of Bishops Cleafish, Waddell, and Veristek, all of them alleged to be theosophists, he consecrated an occultist named Frank B. Robinson, who ran a Psychiana Society at Moscow, Idaho. Next followed the consecration on January 1st, 1946, of Edmund Walker Baxter as Lord Abbot of San Luigi. On July 24th that same year, assisted by Bishops Cleafish and Hampton, the Patriarch President raised to the episcopate Odo Akison Berry, later Mark Hollenbaugh, at first primate of the Canadian Catholic Church. On December 8, 1949, Anid handed on the Melkite succession to Nicholas Urbanovich at San Francisco, more lines being supplied by Bishop Cleafish, who assisted at the function. The Byzantine American Church has now ceased to appear in the Yearbook of American Churches, so it is not certain if it still functions. 6. Eastern Orthodox Catholic Church in America. All that the Yearbook of American Churches tells us in its 1961 edition is that this sect was organized in 1927 in New York as an independent body, membership dispersed in 1959 among other Orthodox churches. But the 1958 issue was more informative. The foundation of this body stems from the authority and wishes of the Patriarch Tikhon of the Russian Orthodox Church and the acts of his successors to propagate the Orthodox faith among the English-speaking people in America. In 1927, the Holy Eastern Orthodox Catholic and Apostolic Church in America was created. This statement suggests that his body may have been an offshoot of the American Orthodox Church, founded by Efthymios Ophaish, after the Russian bishops had withdrawn their support in 1927. Until 1959, the ruling bishop was John M. Moore Marino, whose headquarters were at the Cathedral of Our Savior, 251 West 69th Street, New York City, 23. It has been stated that Marino was raised to the episcopate on November 20th, 1943, by a prelate named J.T. Beckles, known as Mar Thomas Theophilus, Archbishop Primate Metropolitan and Patriarch of the Evangelical Orthodox Church. His beatitude Beckles claimed to have been consecrated in 1927, but where and by whom is not certain. This body must have been the smallest Orthodox church in the world, for in 1958 it had only one place of worship, only one ordained clergyman, and a total membership of 39. 7. Episcopal Orthodox Church, Greek Communion. The yearning among Negro Christians in North America to be in communion with one or other of the Eastern churches is one of the things which suggests the Roman Church might succeed more in Africa if she introduced Oriental rites. This particular body, however, did not last more than 25 years. The Episcopal Orthodox Church appears to have been founded in San Fernando, Trinidad. It was incorporated in Cuba in 1921 and in the New York State in 1939. The founder, His Eminence E. N. Jack, gave himself the title of the International Exalted Archbishop in Charge, and by 1945 had fixed his headquarters at St. McGinley, the Martyrs Orthodox Cathedral. Bridgetown, Barbados. Also located here was St. McGinley's Greek Orthodox Seminary, where were taught Pittman's shorthand, bookkeeping, touch typewriting, theology, and general instruction. Quite a large staff was attached to the cathedral, including several deaconesses and subdeaconesses, a canon and a curate, and a couple of lady missionaries. It appears that His Eminence was raised to the episcopate by Bishop Grant Barrow of the African Orthodox Church, Vilat succession, who had lapsed into schism from the main group under Patriarch Maguire. The International Exalted Archbishop's sheep were all black, most of them Negroes in Barbados and Trinidad. He claimed that his church really dated from AD 33, when it was founded in Greece by a certain Kokorakis and acknowledged by Paul the Apostle at Athens in AD 54. He reckoned that there were 5,000 persons under his jurisdiction. Moreover, it was the oldest Catholic church in Europe, apparently because it taught congregational singing by the plagal tone of Kyrie eleison, whatever this meant. This outpost of the Eastern Orthodox Church in the West Indies must have been a fascinating body, and interestingly heterodox in its beliefs. Among the obligatory subjects in the curriculum to be studied by its clergy was Rosicrucian philosophy. Greek, Spanish, and instrumental music were only recommended. They had no choice but to be worker priests, and the trades suggested would have been quite in keeping with Mission de France: tailor, watch and clock repairer, shoemaker, printer, and bookbinder. The International Exalted Archbishop died in 1954, and no recent information about the Orthodox Diocese of the West Indies and British Guiana is forthcoming. B. Churches of Latin origin. Polish Mariavite Church. 1. Polish Mariavite Church. 2. Polish National Catholic Church. 3. Spanish Reformed Episcopal Church. 4. Lusitanian Church, Catholic, Apostolic, Evangelical. 5. Philippine Independent Church. 6. Brazilian Catholic Apostolic Church. 7. Canadian Catholic Church. 8. Old Catholic Church of Yugoslavia. 9. Reformed Catholic Church, Utrecht Confession. 1. Polish Mariavite Church. The origins of this schismatic body are to be found in Poland, where in 1883 to 1884, the Reverend Casimir Przemski formed a group of priests who observed the rule of the Third Order of St. Francis. About 3 years later, a poor seamstress, Maria Franciszka Kozlowska, founded a community of Franciscan tertiaries who were directed by the former body. On August 2, 1893, Maria, now known as Sister Felicia, claimed to have had a vision of the Blessed Virgin and a divine command to establish a mixed order of men and women dedicated to Our Lady. The tertiaries were united as the Mariavite Union. The mother house was established at Felicianov near Plock, about 55 miles northwest of Warsaw. Sister Felicia soon had a large following, mainly drawn from the peasant classes, who called her Macieczka, or Little Mother. She continued to have revelations, with the result that she began to be venerated as a saint. The Mariavites were united by a strong belief in Polish messianism, convinced that through the sufferings and ultimate resurrection of the Polish nation, great benefits would result to the Catholic Church and to all mankind. The double monasteries of friars and sisters maintained homes for the aged, ran dispensaries, and sponsored cooperative societies. Although much good work was being done by these people, they had many enemies. The Polish bishops finally decided to make an inquiry into the irregularities of faith and morals which were suspected, and a report was submitted to Rome. The authorities came to the conclusion that Sister Felicia's visions were merely hallucinations and ordered the suppression of the Mariavites. They refused to obey and were excommunicated by Ebola Pius X, dated April 5, 1906. By this time, there were about 50 priests and some 20 parishes. The total number of the schismatics was estimated at 500,000, but by 1907 they had dropped to about 60,000. Meanwhile, the Russian government had given its approval to the Mariavites, in spite of strong protests by the Polish Catholic hierarchy. General Alexei Kiriev, the well-known Russian layman who was always ready to back any movement which he thought would weaken the political power of the papacy, managed to win the support of the old Catholic bishops in Holland. The Mariovites were admitted into communion with the Church of Utrecht, and on October 5, 1909, Archbishop Gerard Escoul, with Archbishop A.H. Matthew as one of the co-consecrators, raised Jean-Marie Michael Kowalski to the episcopate under the title of Archbishop of Felicianov, primate of the Old Catholic Church of the Mariovites. The new prelate had under his jurisdiction about 40 priests, 22 parishes, and an estimated 20,000 layfolk. Most of them were in central Poland. The Russian Duma gave official recognition to the Mariovite Church in 1911. At first there was little or nothing heterodox about its fundamental doctrinal opinions, but the ritual and ceremonial tended to be exotic. Mass was always celebrated before the Blessed Sacrament exposed, and in the vernacular. It was not long, however, before clerical celibacy was abolished. During the First World War, an unhealthy development towards near Mariolatry led to permission being granted for the ordination of women. Archbishop Kowalski eventually came to the conclusion that he was more or less infallible and impeccable. He took one of his Franciscan sisters, Maria Isabella Wiluka, as his spiritual directress. Before long, mystical marriages between the priests and alleged holy women became common, and it is said that some of these associations were akin to those which existed among the members of the Abode of Love in England. Sister Isabella managed to gain great power over the archbishop and became known as the Episcopal Sister or the High Priestess. In 1921, Benedict XV had established the Feast of Mary, Mediatrix of all graces, stressing the doctrine of Mary's maternal solicitude for the human race, closely connected with her Son's redemptive mission, so that it is an integral part of it and extends to all graces won for us by Christ. Having already opened up the ranks of the priesthood to women, Kowalski felt that devotion to Our Lady could not be perfect without lady bishops. On March 29, 1929, he consecrated the Episcopal Sister, who acted as his coadjutrix and the mediatrix of all graces. Good use was made of her charismata. As Superioress General of the Mariovite Sisters, she ordained many priestesses, some of them still alive, and also consecrated 11 bishopesses between April 5th and June 4th, 1931. Michael Kowalski loved making bishops, among whom were Andrzej Golubiowski, 1910, Jakub Poczniewski, 1910, Francey Roztowarowski, 1924, Bartolomew Przyjewski, 1929, Philip Feldman, 1929, Simon Buchholz, 1933, and Titus Siedlecki, 1935. Not content with ordaining Polish priests of both sexes, Kowalski further consecrated a Lithuanian, Felix Tulaba, 1939, and a Frenchman, Marc-Marie Paul Fatome. The latter, a lapsed Roman Catholic and student at the Seminary of Countesses, was raised to the episcopate on September 4, 1938, as Legionary Bishop from France. After this, he called himself Père Marc and adorned the door of his chapel at Nantes with a monstrance as a symbol of being in mystical union with the Mariovites. On April 5, 1949, he consecrated Gaston Perrier as his coadjutor, and on October 9th that same year, Paulus Helmut Norbert Maas as Legionary Bishop for Germany. Fatome died at Nantes on August 28, 1951. Soon after Fatome's death, Perrier broke away from the Mariovites and formed what he called the Église catholique de Francais. Maas, having returned to Germany on May 24, 1953, consecrated Ephrem Maria Mauro Fussi to win over the Italians to Mariovitism. Perrier having deserted the Mariovites, Maas gave them another bishop in the person of Jean-André Prévost on August 9, 1953. Feeling that there was a good chance of converting the Sicilians to Sister Felicia's version of Catholicism, Fussi consecrated Clemente Alfio Giroi Marchisi on May 26, 1954. There is no doubt that the Mariovites have a great sense of mission, and they were generous either in providing bishops for autocephalous churches or adding a few lines of apostolic succession to prelates already consecrated. Archbishop Prochniewski, for instance, gave the Old Catholics of Hungary their first bishop in the person of Thomas Czernohorski Fehervari on November 11, 1945. Monsignor Fusi, although holding the title of Bishop of Milan and Rome, did not regard his jurisdiction as confined to Italy, and on April 14, 1955, gave to Julien Erny, pastor of a Free Protestant parish at Bienne, Switzerland, what in the event proved to be the first of several consecrations. Erny had been brought up in France by pious Catholic parents, had spent some years in the seminary of St. Nicholas de Chardonnay, Paris, but lost his faith during the First World War. By 1917, he had regained a vague belief in a sort of non-institutional Christianity. Having studied at Geneva, he worked for several years with the Église chrétienne belge, mostly among the poorer classes in rural districts. Contacts with Frank Duchesne, a priest in Brussels who belonged to Winnert's Église catholique évangélique, helped him to realize that Calvinism would not create the universal church about which he was now dreaming. Eventually, Erny accepted a call to become the pastor of an Église libre at Bienne and the Bern canton at Switzerland. He was such a liberal and modernist in his opinions that it would have been difficult for him to find a niche in any organized religious body. His main interest was the promotion of an all-inclusive Christian church. With this end in view, he founded the Ligue Œcuménique pour l'Unité Chrétienne, inspired by a similar organization planned by Père Gard, who belonged to Winnert's little body. Having contacted several of the neo-Gnostic French bishops, Erny became dissatisfied with the status of what he called a pasteur œcuménique and yearned for the episcopate. He tried to induce Bishop Curie of the Swiss Christian Catholic Church to consecrate him, but this prelate did not see his way to oblige, no doubt because Erny was now associated with all sorts of heterodox bodies, on which the respectable Swiss Old Catholics looked with disapproval. In the end, Erny had to be satisfied with the Mariovites. The consecration by Fusi made him feel that he had greater authority to go ahead with planning his universal church. But Erny wanted more lines of apostolic succession. So on July 11, 1956, he got Archbishop John I of Vancouver, W.F. Woolsey, head of the Canadian Temple of the More Abundant Life and president of the Universal Life Foundation, to reconsecrate him. The ecumenical visions grew larger and brighter, and Erny was eager to share his multiform apostolic succession with almost anybody, and ready to enroll any sect in his League for Christian Unity. He could claim that it had countless distinguished members, lay and clerical, in Switzerland, France, Germany, Austria, Italy, Holland, Norway, Belgium, Great Britain, the USA, Mexico, Brazil, North and South Africa, and India. They came mostly from some of the less-known bodies which have not been admitted to the World Council of Churches. In the USA, especially, these autocephalous bodies were very eclectic in their affiliations and included the Reformed Catholic Church, American Catholic Church, Old Catholic Church in America, First Methodist Church, Universal Spiritualist Church, Evangelical Church, Church of Simon of Cyrene, Church of the Merciful Savior, Church of the New Jerusalem, Swedenborgian, Church of the Order of Antioch, and the Christian Ecumenical Church of Truth. In Europe, Mariovites, Gnostics, Reformed Orthodox, and numerous tiny sects, most calling themselves Old Catholic, were all on more or less friendly terms. A few years ago, Bishop Erny retired from Bienne to Geneva, where he continues to propagate his Ecumenical League for Christian Unity with tireless zeal. He has stated that several bishops of autocephalous churches are hoping to form what is called a siège ecclésial œcuménique without creating a new or super church. It remains to be seen what will come of this true crusade of the 20th century, and if, as its promoters hope, it will create a one church, wholly universal and apostolic, in which unity would reign in diversity. In the land of its birth, the Mariovite Church has certainly not shown an ecumenical character. It has been torn by internal dissensions ever since it was founded half a century ago. Bishop Feldman gained more and more followers, and finally managed to depose Archbishop Kowalski, who was shut up in a monastery by the government, the only alternative to confinement in a mental hospital. Bishopess Isabella Wiluka, together with all the other lay lady priests and prelates, withdrew from public activity, but managed to continue ministering secretly in several parishes. By 1946, the numbers of the Mariovites were greatly reduced, and they linked up with the so-called Old Catholic Church of Poland, a body not recognized by the Utrecht Union. It was decreed that each group would retain its own organization, respective beliefs, and modes of worship. The first primate of the United Church was Bartolomé Przyszewski, consecrated by Kowalski in 1929, but who had helped to form the Polish Old Catholic Church. Bishop Farron acted as his assistant, and a second assistant was Zygmunt Zippold, consecrated by Prochnevsky in 1947. 3 years later, Farron, weary of the wranglings of heretics and schismatics, submitted to the Holy See. Under Przyszewski's leadership, the Old Catholic section sought affiliation with Carrefour's North American Old Roman Catholic Church, having abolished the ordination of women. Another group of Mariovites who emigrated to North America placed themselves in 1927 under the jurisdiction of Archbishop Abbot Brothers of St. Dunstan's Abbey, Coscob, Connecticut. Later on, he claimed to be the American representative of the Mariovite Church, not only in North America, but also in Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, France, and Morocco. He was still promoting Mariovitism as late as 1950, and boasted of a Jew, a most splendid young fellow, a fine example of what a Mariovite can and should be. The Archbishop Abbot, himself married like a good Mariovite, was planning to find a sphere for his brother Bernard in California, the breeding ground of so many strange cults. On May 5, 1956, Monsignor Prevost, the Mariovite bishop for France, raised Robert Bonnet to the episcopate as Legionary Bishop for Morocco, and he was also in full communion with Archbishop Abbot Brothers in North America. On January 20, 1957, Monsignor Prevost gave a Mariovite bishop to Belgium in the person of Jacques Misset. Mariovitism, with its apocalyptic mysticism, glamorous ritual, and ceremonial, had much the same appeal for a small esoteric circle of Anglo-Catholics as the Order of Corporate Reunion had for an earlier generation. Such persons, most of them romantic young men, were usually Jacobites. Polish Messianism could be linked up with the Stuart dynasty because Bonnie Prince Charlie's mother was Maria Klementina Sobieska, a member of the dethroned royal house of Poland. During the 1930s, there were several cryptic clerics in England who confided that they were Mariovites, secret agents of what ordinary folk regarded as a lost cause. One of them, a former Anglican clergyman, called himself Augustine, Polish Old Catholic priest. The best known of the English Mariovites was Walter Willman, who as a youth worked in the cloth trade at Bradford. In 1913, he was licensed as a lay reader by Dr. Drury, Bishop of Ripon. Having served in the Royal Artillery on the Western Front during the First World War, Willman became a lay missionary in South Yorkshire. On May 2, 1934, he was ordained priest by Basil M. Stannard, Bishop of Walsingham, and founder of the Catholic Christian Church. This short-lived body was already associated with some of the lesser-known so-called Old Catholic churches on the continent, so Father Willman went to Poland with another like-minded young man, hoping to link up with the Mariovites. It is said that the government, possibly the dictator Pilsudski himself, prevented Archbishop Kowalski from consecrating Willman. After staying with the Mariovite monks and nuns at Plock, he returned to England, invested with the bizarre white habit worn by this mixed community, most of whom were married. In July 1935, he was notified from Plock that he had been elected bishop. Later, he received from Kowalski, now in enforced confinement, a document purporting to appoint him to the episcopate by post. About 1943, Father Pat Shaw, who had been rector of All Saints, York, for 30 years, made this Catholic Christian priest and Mariovite bishop his parish clerk, and installed him in the medieval Ankerhold adjoining this famous Anglo-Catholic church. There is a legend that on the written authorization to perform episcopal acts, said to have been received from Archbishop Kowalski, who died in Dachau concentration camp in 1942, Willman consecrated one bishop, Anthony King Wilson, known as Bishop Anthony of Leeds, but actually he merely installed him as the superior of an independent Christian mission in that city. On November 1st, 1950, the Minister General of the Mariovites appointed Wilman as Minister Provincial of the Mariovite Order in England, with jurisdiction over all others claiming to belong to this church. Some tried to supplant him, but without success. Eventually, the bishop hermit's health broke down, and he had to leave his cold, damp cell and was taken to the old people's home at Brackenhill, York. He died in the York City Hospital in September 1962, aged 75, and was buried with Anglican rites in the family grave in his native Bradford. The Mariovite anchorite is recalled as a genial little man with a fund of racy clerical stories. It is not known what were his reactions as Minister General of the Mariovite Order in England when on September 18, 1954, Monsignor Sigroy Marchesi, Mariovite Bishop for Sicily, reconsecrated both Mar Georgius, Patriarch of Glastonbury, and Mar Ioannis, Archbishop of Carim, or if he was invited to the function in the ancient Catholic Cathedral of the Good Shepherd, Chelsea. Did he regard himself as being in loose communion with Archbishop Ignatius Carolus, primate of the Old Holy Catholic Church, who in 1957 appears to have consecrated Monsignor Alexander de Castro de la Chastre Grimaldi Lascaris, Prince de Dios, who was said to have been consecrated by Monsignor Marchesi, Mariovite Bishop for Italy. During the past half-century, the Mariovites have mothered such a numerous and hybrid offspring that it is difficult for a student of the byways of church history to catalog them correctly. 2. Polish National Catholic Church. It would be true enough to say that the vision seen by Sister Felicia Kozłowska resulted in almost as much disunity as those of Joachim de Fiora in the 12th century. The Congregation of the Holy Office may not have been far wrong in deciding that this 19th century Franciscan tertiary was a victim of hallucinations. Poles who wanted to throw off the yoke of Rome had to wait until Francis Hodor came along a few years later before they managed to lay the foundations of an independent church, purged as they believed of papalist corruptions and immune as they hoped from the Mariovite ones. Some of the Polish immigrants in North America strongly resented being under the jurisdiction of either German or Irish bishops and to having non-Polish pastors appointed to almost exclusively Polish parishes. By the 1880s, most large cities in the USA contained groups of Poles living apart from other Catholics and having no wish to be integrated with them. These aliens had their own traditions of church administration and naturally saw no reason why things should be different from what they had been accustomed to at home. The majority of these expatriate Poles were poor and ignorant and accepted their priests as almost infallible. The first schismatic Polish congregation was formed at Chicago by Father Antony Kozłowski in 1895. On November 17, 1897, he was raised to the episcopate at Bern by Bishop Herzog, assisted by Archbishop Gould of Utrecht and Bishop Weber of Bonn. Within the next 10 years, he had organized 23 schismatic parishes from New Jersey in the east to Manitoba in the west. Kozłowski called his followers the Polish Old Catholic Church. Another schism was started at Buffalo in 1895 under the leadership of Father Stanislas Kaminski, who, as stated already, was consecrated by Vilat in 1898. There was another and larger group of nationalistic-minded Poles in Pennsylvania, mostly in and around Scranton. Their leader, Father Francis Hodor, had been born near Krakow of peasant stock in 1866. After his ordination in 1893, he came to the United States, and within 4 years found himself in opposition to his Irish bishop, Monsignor William O'Hara. We are told that Hodor was full of the spirit of Polish messianism as expounded by Mickiewicz, an author whom he greatly admired. He was also touched by the poetry of Maria Konopnicka, who in her writings had shown great sympathy for the Polish poor. He was, besides, a voluminous reader in the fields of philosophy, comparative religion, and church history. His whole background and experience disposed him to sympathize with these people, so after hearing their story and pondering in silence for a while, he said, "Let all those who are dissatisfied and feel wronged in this affair set about organizing and building a new church, which shall remain in possession of the people themselves. After that, we shall decide what further steps are necessary." The church was built, and the Poles refused to hand it over to Bishop O'Hara. Father Hodor went to Rome, hoping to gain support for his people, but got no satisfaction. All that resulted was his own excommunication on October 22, 1898. He burned the document before his congregation and declared that he no longer recognized the authority of the Holy See. He started to celebrate Mass in Polish, and by 1904, his separatist movement had gained about 16,000 adherents. He was elected bishop, but it was not until September 29, 1907, that he managed to get consecrated at Utrecht by 3 Old Catholic prelates. Bishop Kozlowski died the same year, and eventually Hodor managed to incorporate most of his Old Catholic parishes into what was now known as the Polish National Catholic Church. The independence of Hodor's mentality may be gauged by his statement, "The leaders of the PNCC are of the opinion that before God and before America, all beliefs, all sects are equal. If God did not wish a certain sect to exist, he would not give it the necessary powers to exist and to develop." In the course of time, he changed not only the government of his church, but the doctrines as well. An official confession of faith was drawn up and adopted in 1913. 6 years before this, Hodor had raised the Word of God, read, expounded, and listened to the status of the great sacrament of a Christian national church. In order to retain the traditional number of 7, he reckoned baptism and confirmation as one sacrament. Adults were not obliged to take use of the sacrament of penance, which was only obligatory on persons to the age of 20. The doctrine of eternal punishment was rejected. An emotional reaction against some of the then popular hellfire sermonizing of Roman Catholic, especially Irish mission preaching. Hodor's teaching without denying the divinity of Christ, and like Arians and Unitarians, gave the impression that Christ is primarily a lofty human example rather than the second person of the Holy Trinity. Only a few changes were made in the structure of the Roman Rite, and more in the internal form of the prayers. Although Hodor retained the calendar of the Roman Missal, he instituted several new feasts of a popular and nationalistic character. Then there were also solemn commemorations of religious reformers and Polish patriots, several of whom had been openly opposed to the papacy. 4 more bishops were consecrated at Scranton in 1924, including a coadjutor, Leon Grakowski. Hodor appointed 1 bishop for the Eastern Diocese, 1 for the Western, 1 for Poland, and 1 for the Lithuanians. He had already helped to form a Lithuanian National Catholic Church for North America in 1914. Clerical celibacy was abolished in 1921, and most of the priests took advantage of this, though Hodor himself remained a bachelor. Between 1926 and 1936, the National Church increased its membership from 61,874 to 186,000. A seminary for training priests was opened at Scranton and dedicated to Girolamo Savonarola, the 15th century Dominican who was hanged as a heretic at Florence after his excommunication by Alexander VI. Hodor venerated this Italian reformer and felt that the students could not have a better example to imitate. The founder of the PNCC died at the age of 86 on February 16, 1952, and was succeeded as prime bishop by his married coadjutor, Leon Grakowski. The attempt to organize a rival schismatic church to the Mariovites in Poland did not have the success expected. In 1930, Hodor had consecrated Władysław Baron for Poland, but deposed him within a year. Joseph Padiewski was raised to the episcopate in 1936 in the hope of keeping the church afloat. At the time of writing, it is said to number about 50,000 members, but even with the support of the communist government, it has not made much progress. In North America, the PNCC claimed an inclusive membership of 271,316 in 1958, with 147 ordained clergy having charge of 157 places of worship. Its headquarters are at 529 East Locust Street, Scranton 3, Pennsylvania. Leon Grakowski still holds the office of prime bishop and combines this with the care of the central diocese. There are 3 other dioceses, Eastern, Western, and Buffalo-Pittsburgh. Since 1946, the PNCC has been in full communion with the Protestant Episcopal Church. About 30 Episcopalian bishops have had as their co-consecrators prelates of the schismatic Polish Church. This enables them to claim the old Catholic line of succession derived from the Church of Utrecht. In 1948, the PNCC was admitted to the World Council of Churches, having already joined the National Council of Churches, USA. Rather surprisingly, this hitherto exclusively Polish church has now begun to cooperate actively with the Puerto Rican National Catholic Church, which, so it is stated, is a growing body under the ecclesiastical jurisdiction of the Reverend Father Hector Gonzalez. On November 5, 1961, Bishop Grechkowski confirmed 273 schismatic Latin Catholics. It appears that Father Gonzalez is optimistic of breaking down the power of the Papists, who at the moment are estimated to form 92.6% of the total population of this West Indian island. He has established a radio network over 5 stations to spread the Christian faith. So before long, the 2 bishops in Puerto Rico, who are in communion with the Holy See, may find out that more and more of their flocks are being brought into communion with Canterbury, Scranton, and Utrecht. Had there been more sympathy and understanding on both sides 60 years ago, it is doubtful if the Polish Americans would have felt it worthwhile to set up a national church. Today, with the almost complete integration of the Poles into normal American life, there is not even the original language bond, so it is hard to find convincing reasons for maintaining a state of schism, unless the modern disciples of Kozlowski and Hodor are convinced that in cutting themselves adrift from the papacy, they have found a purer form of Catholicism. 3. Spanish Reformed Episcopal Church, Iglesia Española Reformada Episcopal. The rigid religious laws have always made it difficult for any religious body not in communion with the Holy See to exist in Spain. An independent church on Protestant lines was formed in 1871, and in 1894, Lord Plunkett, Archbishop of Dublin, laid hands on a Signor Cabrera so that this body, which had much in common with the Church of Ireland, could have a bishop, able to counteract idolatry and superstition among the Iberians. 3 years later, Bishop Myers, who had been consecrated in London on Guy Fawkes Day 1897 by Leon Chechemian, who then combined the duties of primate of the Free Protestant Episcopal Church of England with those of Metropolitan of both the ancient British Church and the United Armenian Catholic Church in the British Isles, was sent to Spain to assist Bishop Cabrera. The last named died in 1916, after which the Protestant body did not have a Spanish bishop until April 29, 1956, when Santos M. Molina was consecrated in Madrid by Dr. James McCann, the Bishop of Meath, assisted by the bishops of Minnesota and northern Indiana. The Spanish Reformed Church in recent years has become much more liturgical in its modes of worship, and it has been said that if you want to attend the Mozarabic rite, you must go to the Cathedral of Christ the Redeemer, Madrid, where an Anglican American version of it is carried out with much greater decency and dignity than the Mozarabic chapel at Toledo Cathedral. Archbishop Lord Plunkett, were he alive today, would be shocked to hear that Bishop Molina wears Eucharistic vestments based on ancient Spanish models when celebrating the vernacular version of the Mozarabic rite. Although toleration for non-Roman Catholic Christianity became effective in 1910, the position of minorities in Spain is still far from easy, and non-Roman Catholic services cannot be advertised. But as has been pointed out, a Spain that could treat her religious minorities as her critics would wish would cease to be Spain. 4. Lusitanian Church, Catholic, Apostolic, Evangelical, Igreja Lusitana, Católica Apostólica Evangélica. In 1880, a few scattered congregations of lapsed Latin Catholics in Portugal, whose priests had been influenced by the Old Catholic movement after the definition of papal infallibility at the First Vatican Council, formed themselves into the Igreja Lusitana Católica Apostólica Evangélica. It was stated in the first prayer book published in 1882, "We do not desire to found a new religion, but simply to cleanse the Christian religion from the corruption of ages, and to recover the ancient liberties of the early Lusitanian Church, so long subjected to the foreign yoke of Rome, and to spread through all this country a doctrine which shall be Catholic and Apostolic, in a church that shall be Portuguese and not Roman." The Roman Catholic Church was disestablished in 1911, and it was not until 1918 that diplomatic relations with the Vatican were resumed. The National Church remained a small and almost unknown body, and it was not until June 22, 1958, that the Reverend Antonio Ferreira Fiandor was raised to the episcopate by Dr. Plinio L. Simoes, the Protestant Episcopal Bishop of southwestern Brazil, assisted by Dr. James McCann, Bishop of Meath, Premier Bishop of the Church of Ireland, and Dr. Norman B. Nash, Bishop in charge of Protestant Episcopal European churches. Bishop Finador had been succeeded by Dr. Luis Cesar Rodriguez Pereira, who was consecrated on June 24, 1962, by Bishop Stephen Bain, Executive Officer of the Anglican Communion, assisted by the retired Lusitanian Bishop and the Old Catholic Archbishop of Utrecht and Bishop of Deventer. The worship of the Lusitanian Church, based as far as possible on the Rite of Braga, is being developed so as to bring it into conformity with the modern liturgical movement, with midnight Eucharists at the greater festivals, the observance of the Easter Vigil, and the wearing of Eucharistic vestments by the bishop. It is hoped that this indigenous and autonomous Episcopal Church may soon have the same relationships to the churches of the Anglican Communion, as have the Old Catholic churches of the Utrecht Union. Relations with the Roman Catholic hierarchy in Portugal appear to be friendly. During the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity in 1961, Dr. Pereira, not yet a bishop, was invited to address the students of a seminary. 5. Philippine Independent Church, Iglesia Filipina Independiente. If the size of membership is taken as a criterion, then this church, the Iglesia Filipina Independiente, is by far the most important we have dealt with in this book. Spanish and Catholic influence only began in the Philippine Islands in 1521, nearly 2 centuries after the coming of Islam. By 1600, most of the archipelago had been peacefully reduced to a colony of Spain. During the 3 centuries that elapsed before the first beginning of a national church in 1890, at least 5 interconnected situations arose, all of which bear some responsibility for the schism. The Spanish colonists, never more than 5,000 at any one time, did little and perhaps less than elsewhere to prepare themselves or the natives. Indios is the official pre-independence name for Filipinos, for ecclesiastical or political independence. Even Castilian, which might have forged a bond between the archipelago and Spain, was little taught outside Manila, and only one Philippine-born priest, a mestizo, was raised to the episcopate. The political as well as the ecclesiastical control of the islands was consolidated in the hands of the bishops and clergy, who were nearly all Spanish friars. Augustinians, friars minor, Dominicans, and Franciscan recollects, who, with the Jesuits, contested successfully every attempt by Spain to replace them with secular clergy. On the other hand, the Spaniards were not to be blamed more than others for the state of affairs. There were wheels within wheels all the time. The balance of social life between the native Indios, the Spanish colonists, the Filipinos, local-born Spaniards, and the mestizos, half-breeds, either Philippine Spanish or Philippine Chinese. The Chinese, not numerous but influential, being the nearest civilized nation, was upset by the fact that these same friars were among the major landowners on the islands. It must not be forgotten, on the other hand, that their peaceful conquest obviated the presence of Spanish troops till 1822. In 1869, the opening of Napoleon III's Suez Canal by his Spanish-born Empress Eugenie opened Europe and its liberalism to native Philippine youth. The resulting anti-Spanish rebellion, which was prevented at Manila and openly repressed in 1872, ended in wholesale imprisonments and the execution for complicity of, among others, 3 secular priests, Gomez, Zamora, and Burgos. This This it was which, more than anything, consolidated the young Filipino party and ruined permanently whatever ease had grown up between imperialists and colonials. In 1890, at Paniqui, Isabelo de los Reyes, a 30-year-old priest, Gregorio Aglipe, ex-houseboy at the Augustinian Friary in Manila, who had been ordained the previous year, and several other secular clergy, organized an anti-Spanish church, which they put under the immediate protection of the Vatican, thus bypassing the local Spanish hierarchy. Less than 12 months later, José P. Rizal y Mercado began his preparations for political independence by founding the Liga Filipina. The revolt itself broke out in 1896. Many Filipinos lost their lives, but independence was proclaimed on June 12, 1898. During the Spanish-American and short ensuing American-Philippine War, February 1898 to the end of 1899, and only 4 months after the Declaration of Independence, the President of the new Republic, General Aguinaldo, on October 20, 1898, appointed his friend Aglipe to be his military vicar general. For 8 years, Rome, for whatever reason, had allowed the Philippine question to remain unsettled, and had taken no steps against either the Archbishop of Manila or Aglipe. Now, in spite of the cause pending at Rome, the former peremptorily excommunicated the latter for accepting the military appointment without the permission of his Spanish ordinary. Following the Spanish-American War, the Spanish, by treaty, evacuated Cuba and for $20 million sold the Philippines to the USA. After 3 years of military government, the USA appointed Judge Taft as civil governor, 1901 to 1904. His task was difficult. It was made more difficult by the power and the Spanishness in thought of the Church. On the one hand, after negotiating with the Curia of Leo XIII, he paid St. Pius X $8 million for 400,000 acres of land belonging to the friars, and secured the replacement of the Spanish bishops with an American hierarchy. On the other hand, further to weaken Spanish clerical influence, he strongly supported the Iglesia Filipina Independiente, and it was under his governorship. On August 3, 1902, this body, still Orthodox, went officially into schism and broke off relations with the Vatican. Aglipe declared Pontifex Maximus, proclaimed, "I solemnly declare that today we definitely secede from the Church of Rome and renounce our allegiance to the Vatican, and proclaim ourselves a Christian, Catholic, and independent church." Soon after this, Aglipe became the supreme bishop of the schismatic body, but he had to be satisfied with the laying on of hands by some of his priests. He explained that since a layman can baptize in an emergency, so when no prelates are available, a priest can make a bishop, as is the law in the Finnish Lutheran Church. By 1904, he had about 200,000 followers, mostly in the north, out of a total population of 7 million. He was on good terms with the Freemasons and received their support. Not long after this, Pius X attempted a rapprochement with the other Supreme Pontiff, sending a conciliatory message by the Maltese Benedictine Archbishop of Palmyra, Dom Ambrose Agius, monk of Ramsgate, who had been appointed apostolic nuncio to the Philippines. The belated kindly offer was rejected. The Pontifex Maximus in his fundamental epistles remained orthodox by at least keeping to the great creeds and insisting on the use of the Missal Romanum. But in 1906, the USA handed back to the Catholic hierarchy properties which the schismatics had acquired by peaceable possession. In other words, by having had control of the church door and cemetery gate keys at the crucial juncture. In the same year, Aglipe introduced his new prayer book, Officio Divino, and Gospel Harmony, the latter with a distinct Marcionite tinge. The deity was reduced from a trinity of persons to a trinity of attributes. Aglipe was initiated as a Mason in 1914. Having lost so many church keys, he was in danger of losing all control and power. In vain he tried to negotiate with Protestants, Anglicans, and Old Catholics. He approached Bishop Brent, who had been appointed to the Protestant Episcopal Missionary District of the Philippines, and he approached the Swiss Old Catholics. But Bishop Herzog had become alarmed at the reported Unitarianism of the two founders and leaders, Aglape and Isabelo de los Reyes Sr. These two turned more and more to American Unitarianism and fostered the growth of contacts with the International Association for Liberal Christianity and Religious Freedom. They were not followed by many others, priests or intellectuals. Isabelo de los Reyes Sr. was the real founder of the church and wrote all the theological statements of the new religion. He was reconciled with the Roman Church 2 years before his death. The Unitarians in the USA encouraged Aglape's approaches and arranged for him and 2 other bishops to attend the Unitarian Convention at Boston, Massachusetts. A year or so afterwards, he took part in the convention of the Association for Liberal Christianity and Religious Freedom at Copenhagen. He died on September 1st, 1940. He had lived in concubinage for many years, but latterly he was married by a Unitarian minister. He asked for a priest during his last illness, but his followers took care that he was not reconciled with the Roman Church, and he died in a maternity home. Aglape was succeeded by Santiago Fonacier, who, after being deposed 6 years later by the more orthodox members of the Iglesia Filipina Independiente, set up a second and rival schismatic church called the Independent Church of Filipino Christians, in effect a small Unitarian sect. For a few months after 1946, Gerardo Bayaca acted as Pontifex Maximus and was succeeded by the founder's son, Isabelo de los Reyes Jr., married, age 25, already the father of several children, and a lapsed Catholic, on whom Aglape and 4 other bishops had laid hands. Though he had little real theological training, his experiences in the Army and Navy had shown him to be a leader of men. In 1946, he led his bishops and clergy to 1. Renounce Unitarianism, 2. Declare acceptance of the theology of the Protestant Episcopal Church, and 3. Issue a declaration of the faith and articles of religion, all in perfect conformity with Nicaea. Next, he petitioned the Protestant Episcopal Church for Anglican orders. On April 7, 1948, Isabelo de los Reyes Jr. and 2 other bishops were consecrated by Norman S. Binstead, the American Episcopalian bishop of the Missionary District of the Philippines, assisted by his suffragan bishop, Robert F. Wilner, and by Harry S. Kennedy, Bishop of Honolulu. The 3 Philippine prelates then consecrated all other bishops and ordained deacons and priests according to the Anglican rite. Sometime after this, the Philippine Independent Church was admitted to the National Council of Churches of Christ in the USA. By 1957, it had obtained membership of the World Council of Churches. In 1960, the Supreme Council voted for full communion with the Protestant Episcopal Church, which was achieved the following year. This also resulted in communion with the Utrecht Union of Old Catholic Churches. The liturgy now in use is a vernacular adaptation of the Roman Rite, with interpolations from the American version of the Book of Common Prayer. Most of the priests and bishops are married, nearly all are Masons, but Bishop Isabelo de los Reyes Jr., the father of a large family, is not a Mason. This national church works side by side with the Protestant Episcopal Church in the Philippines, as what A. H. Matthew had described to Dr. Davidson, Archbishop of Canterbury, as une église amie. In fact, the Iglesia Filipina Independiente is in very much the relationship to the Anglican Communion that Matthew had hoped for his old Catholic Church in 1908. In the opinion of Lewis Bliss Whitmore, retired Bishop of Western Michigan, the friendship and cooperation of both churches offer the best hope that the Philippines, independent politically, will have the religious freedom which is essential for a democracy. On the other hand, it is reported that the influence and membership of this schismatic body are declining slowly but steadily. Still, Bishop Whitmore is optimistic that the witness of a powerful Reformation church offers an alternative to Roman Catholicism to a Catholic-minded people, and thus redresses the balance which is lacking. Whether this is true, time alone will prove. 6. Brazilian Catholic Apostolic Church, Igreja Católica Apostólica Brasileira. Brazil, a Portuguese colony from 1532, became a kingdom in 1815, a republic in 1889. The first serious attempt to set up a national church appears to have been made after June 1945, when Monsignor Carlos Duarte Costa, 1888 to 1961, formerly Bishop of Botucatu, was excommunicated by the Holy See because of his attacks against the papacy. This led to the formation at Belo Horizonte, Minas state, of a schismatic body known as the Igreja Católica Apostólica Brasileira. There was another but less successful effort in the same direction in 1936, when a priest named Salomão Ferraz organized his followers as the Igreja Católica Livre no Brasil. There was elected bishop and arranged with Father Faron, formerly of the Polish National Catholic Church, to consecrate him, but Faron found it impossible to go to Brazil. Finally, on August 15, 1945, Ferraz was raised to the episcopate by Duarte Costa. Brazil is still a predominantly Catholic nation, although church and state have been separated since 1891, and Duarte Costa and Ferraz did not succeed in making many Catholics join their schismatic bodies. The former consecrated Paulo Castillo Mendez, who on January 23, 1949, raised Stephen Corradi to the episcopate as an independent bishop for Mexico. Corradi, who made his headquarters in Panama, consecrated Albert A. Stier on November 6, 1949, who appears to have received a previous consecration from Archbishop W. F. Francis of Woodstock, New York, Old Catholic Church in America, on July 13, 1947. Meanwhile, Duarte Costa had introduced a vernacular Portuguese liturgy for his followers. He also abolished the sacrament of penance and repudiated clerical celibacy. He died in 1961 and was succeeded by José Aires da Cruz as primate of the Igreja Católica Brasileira. 6. Canadian Catholic Church. This little-known body, with such a comprehensive title, claims to possess the Greek Melkite, Russian Orthodox, Russo-Syrian, Old Catholic Junior, and Liberal Catholic lines of succession, thanks to the prelates who laid hands on its founder, Odo Acheson Berry. His first consecration appears to have been on July 29, 1946, when Anthony Anede, who styled himself Exarch of the Greek Melkite Rite in the USA, assisted by Harry J. Kleefisch, who claimed of the Russian Orthodox succession, raised Berry to the episcopate. The third assistant prelate was Charles Hampton, who, having been Legionary Bishop for the USA in the Liberal Catholic Church since 1935, had lapsed into schism. On October 3, 1948, Berry was reconsecrated sub conditione by Leopold Waddell, another theosophist, who, since 1942, has used the title of Primate of the American Catholic Vilat Succession, Apostolic Church of Long Beach. The Canadian Catholic Archbishop, shortly after his consecration, went to New Zealand, where he remained 6 or 7 years. Then he moved to Ceylon. On September 10, 1953, having no scruples about jurisdiction, he consecrated J.G. Peters at the YMCA in Colombo. This was to make sure that a previous consecration by an unnamed Anglican clergyman, said to have been raised to the episcopate by Vilat, was not deficient. Nobody appears to have heard of this prelate until Peters produced him as his first consecrator. The Patriarch of Glastonbury appointed Bishop Peters as Exarch of the Catholicate of the West for the Indies, with the title of Mar Petros. Not long afterwards, he was deposed from his exalted status. He also held the office as a president and chancellor of St. John's University at Ambur in the Madras province. He issued an official brochure stating that he had been granted ancient plenary powers to confer degrees in virtue of being primate of the Apostolic Church of the Indies, also that he possessed the right and authority to confer academic degrees, university, and other titles by several charters granted him by the British, American, Swiss, French, and other patriarchs of the Church of Christ from every country in the world. Mar Petros died in 1954, so not many persons were able to benefit from the unique advantages he offered them. Mar Columba, to give Barry his new title, arrived in England from Ceylon in 1954. On July 17th the following year, he bestowed on Mar Georges what were claimed to be the Greek Melkite, Russian Orthodox, Russo-Syriac, Old Catholic Junior, and Liberal Catholic lines of succession, thus increasing the Patriarch of Glastonbury's apostolic succession to 15 lines. After remaining in England some years, he returned to Canada about 1960. His long absence from the Dominion had prevented him from developing the Canadian Catholic Church, which seems to have remained a sort of independent branch of the so-called American Catholic Velat succession Apostolic Church of Long Beach, of which Archbishop Waddell was the founder primate. 8. Old Catholic Church of Yugoslavia. After the Vatican Council of 1870, several congregations in what was until 1918 the Empire of Austria-Hungary prepared the way for an old Catholic Church by falling into schism. There were two main groups, one in the north in what was then Bohemia and Moravia, and the other in the south in and around Vienna. Not till 1924, however, did the former, that is, the Old Catholics in what had been the Czechoslovakian Republic since 1918, manage to obtain their first bishop. Alois Pacek, who was consecrated by Archbishop Kennick of Utrecht, the Viennese Old Catholics obtained their first bishop, Adalbert Sindelar, in 1925, when he was consecrated at Bern by Bishop Curie on September 1st, 1925. By this time, an old Catholic body had been formed among the Croats and Slovenes of Yugoslavia. Marko Kologjera, a canon of Spalato Cathedral, was elected bishop and was consecrated at Utrecht on February 25, 1924. Kologjera got into trouble in 1933, having been accused of accepting payment for granting faculties of nullity to divorced persons who wished to remarry. On hearing of this, the Old Catholic bishops, at their conference at Munich in March 1933, broke off relations with the Yugoslav prelate. He managed to make the government realize that he was the innocent victim of a pan-German persecution on the plea that all the Old Catholic bishops, except the Dutch, were German-speaking. The result was a schism among the Old Catholics of Yugoslavia. One group elected a bishop named Ivan Surovsky, who was never consecrated. This body remained in communion with Utrecht. The other group remained loyal to Kologjera, who was supported by the government. On December 21, 1947, Kologjera consecrated Radovan Jost. The former was growing old and realized he must find a successor. His death took place before he managed to consecrate Grigor Kenjic. Eventually, it was arranged for him to be raised to the episcopate by Bishop Milan Raching of the Liberal Catholic Church, permission having been obtained from its presiding bishop, Adrian Vreed. The ceremony took place on February 24, 1957, when Reiching was assisted by J.B.S. Coates, Auxiliary Bishop for Great Britain. 9. Reformed Catholic Church, Utrecht Confession. Just how, when, and where this body, claiming to have active episcopates in Great Britain, France, and Germany, came into being is not certain. According to its own statement, it is one of the worldwide group of Reformed Catholic churches holding valid orders derived from former Roman and Eastern Catholic sources from the inception of the Church in the 17th century. Doctrine is based on the Nicene Creed and the teaching of the ecumenical councils prior to the Great Schism. The province of North America is ruled over by Archbishop W. W. Flynn, whose address is given as P.O. Box 1421, Los Angeles 28, California. It has not been possible to find out who consecrated this prelate, but in 1957 he claimed 20 churches and 18 priests under his jurisdiction. The total membership of the Reformed Catholic Church was given at 2,217. It is not certain if the province of France, which in 1955 was under the jurisdiction of Bishop Louis Paul Mailly, resident in Paris, still functions. Its British representative, Bishop Rupert Pitt Kethley of Ealing Common, who, as Mar Rupertus, forms one of the 14 prelates of the Sacred Synod of the Église catholique apostolique primitive d'Antioche orthodoxe et de tradition syro-byzantine, under Prince Patriarch Marjoannes Maria van Assenfeld-Altland, also acts as the British representative of the United Old Catholic Patriarchate of the World. This international organization has H.E. the Most Reverend Christopher C.J. Stanley, Doctor of Divinity, as its ecumenical patriarch. It would appear that the Reformed Catholic Church, Utrecht Confession, if this is still its official designation, is one of the comprehensive collection of denominations about which Bishop Ernie spoke so enthusiastically in a conference entitled L'unité et marche dans l'œcuménisme. Churches now associated with his Siège ecclésial œcuménique, he visualizes it as a vast international combine of every Christian body except the Catholic and Roman Church. An even more unlikely caricature of Catholicism has recently arisen in South Vietnam, Cochin, China. It is known as Taoism and embodies a hierarchy of pope, cardinals, and bishops, said to reflect the organization of Roman Catholicism. Among its lesser divinities are Victor Hugo and Sun Yat-sen. We are told that the towered temple of Tay Nin is the spiritual center of Taoism, where God speaks through the medium of a moving pencil. Near the altar are images of Jesus, Confucius, Buddha, and Lao Tzu. The Taoists call the temple site their Holy Land. This strange sect was founded about 1925 and is reputed to have at least 2 million members. An American in Saigon related how he had lunched with Cardinal Trong Van Trang and an archbishopess at Tay Nin, who explained that they called the creator Cao Dai and that they did not represent a new religion, for there are too many already. All that the founder had done was to take the best of Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, and Christianity and fuse them into one religion. The cardinal said, "We honor Victor Hugo as an apostle because he wrote with holy compassion for mankind. We receive messages from him and from great spirits of the past and from the Creator. It doesn't matter how the message comes, what it says matters." At the midnight mass on the feast of Tet or New Year's Day, at which the female worshippers wore white hoods, the acting superior gave a sermon and spoke about spiritual cleanliness and urged people not to be afraid to be poor and to be kind to each other. There were rumors that Winston Churchill and Danny Kaye would soon be beatified and canonized, but the Taoist cardinal denied this. A less exotic prelate than the Taoist Cardinal Trong Van Trang was James Fitzgerald Crawford, who at an earlier period of his career had been a minister of the Reformed Presbyterian Church in Ireland. About 1946 he joined the English Episcopal Church, and Bishop C.L. Saul appointed him Archdeacon of Cornwall, but soon found reasons to dismiss him. Later on, Crawford took the title of Bishop of Anglia and proclaimed that he was the head of the Lutheran Episcopal Church of England. He gave out that this new body was associated with the Lutheran World Federation. For various reasons, however, Bishop Crawford found it necessary in 1956 to give up the conversion of England to this form of German Protestantism, and it is not known if he has been able to resume his episcopal activities. It is uncertain if the so-called Free Holy Catholic Church of England, Diocese of Murcia, still exists. In February 1952, a certain Bishop A.F. Baker circulated letters appealing for money to build a cathedral church on the borders of Worcestershire and Warwickshire. Those who subscribed would have their names on permanent display within the cathedral, with the promise that this continual acknowledgement will bring its return benefits through keeping your name in the public mind. This elusive prelate also described his chimerial sect as the Free Protestant Catholic Communion, and stated that this cathedral may, in the event of a third war, be the sole survivor among English cathedrals, and in that case it would become as the nerve center for the continuation of the Christian religion of all denominations. It seemed that not many people responded to the appeal for generous help and assistance to provide this need to assure that a future Christian and civilized way of life will be secured, and by the building of this cathedral for this present generation and for generations yet to come, it will stand as a guardian to withstand the savageries of civilization. 11 years have come and gone, and the Midlands are still without this free Holy Catholic Cathedral. There are more freelance bishops and odder little churches than those mentioned in these pages, some of which appear to exist only in the brains of their founders, and still they go on being planned. Some of these prelates are eager for publicity, others prefer to lead a secluded existence. For instance, in 1915, a certain Archbishop Basilius Kudlowski appeared in England, claiming to be a Melkite. There were rumors that in December that year he consecrated a gentleman who called himself Jean-Marie, Comte de Saint-Sever, but this reputed Melkite prelate vanished after this, and nothing more was heard of him. Even more exciting, especially to those who met him, was the arrival in 1932 of Mar Silva, Archbishop of Nineveh, who, so it appears, found few friends and benefactors in Britain. About 10 years later, the Right Reverend Peter J.G. Graziola, Ph.D., who had the title of Primatio Legate of the American National Catholic Church, and who described himself as Apostolic Administrator of the Diocese of New Jersey, New York, wrote that there are no barriers of jurisdiction or otherwise in the pursuance of the precepts and ideals of true Catholicism. All men are brethren in Christ. Greek, Roman, and Old Catholicism are limbs of the same tree. He felt it deplorable that the mundane should be permitted to obscure this obvious fact, and as the result, human frailty is kept apart in hardly ethical or justifiable or altruistic status quo. Straying off the beaten track into the ecclesiastical forest, the harder it is to distinguish the wood from the trees, even more to memorize the names of its galaxy of fauna and flora. In the end, one almost despairs of disentangling the infinite ramifications of splinter churches during the past century, for they are legion. So we will leave these autocephalous bodies, their prelates, priests, and peoples. I have tried hard not to pass judgment on any of them, but to depict each church as it made itself known in order to gain adherents. It is for my readers to decide which of these bodies, on or over the border of historical Christendom, can be regarded as what St. Peter called a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a consecrated nation, a people God means to have for himself. It is a matter of opinion whether God called some of the pioneers out of darkness into his marvelous light. Can we regard the behavior of their disciples as honorable and praise God for them? Were the founders of these schismatic churches, before they broke away from authority, really no more than sheep going astray? Did the liberty they enjoyed after gaining their independence become a pretext for wrongdoing, or was it used in God's service? Have the disciples been submissive to their masters, not only those who were kind and considerate, but to those who were hard to please? Another way to form an opinion on any group of Christians is to investigate how it has performed the corporal and spiritual works of mercy during the course of its history. So take any of the bodies dealt with in this book and decide if its members have fed the hungry, given drink to the thirsty, clothed the naked, harbored the stranger, visited the sick, ministered to prisoners, and buried the dead. Having studied its external activities, what about the spiritual life of this or that autocephalous church? Have its clergy and laity shown zeal in converting sinners, instructing the ignorant, counseling the doubtful, comforting the sorrowful, bearing wrongs patiently, forgiving enemies, praying for the living and the dead? Let us look closer, bearing in mind the words of Christ. Be on your guard against false prophets, men who come to you in sheep's clothing, but are ravenous wolves within. You will know them by their fruits. What fruits have these independent Christian bodies yielded in the past 100 years? Have they made any definite contribution to scholarship or spirituality? Reference to the printed catalogues of the British Museum, National Library of Congress, or the Bibliothèque Nationale will supply the answer. It will be seen from such sources that neither the clergy nor the laity of these bodies have made names for themselves as authors, apart from 2 or 3 exceptions. But of course it may have been that they were far too busy trying to save souls to be able to give the time to literary work. Will the fairly large output of controversial pamphlets, brochures, and tracts, the authors and titles of which are given in the bibliographies, find a permanent place in reference libraries? Time alone will show if the various vernacular liturgies composed by some of the founders will be classed with the historic Eastern and Western rites of Christendom. So far, none of these bodies have managed to erect churches which symbolize their zeal for corporate worship, but perhaps it is too soon to expect an architectural renaissance led by autocephalous churches and their tropii, marked by a bold modernist outlook. It is impossible to say if either the Eastern or Western churches will eventually make use of the expositions of canon law, ritual and ceremonial which have been drawn up for bodies, often existing largely in the imagination of their founders. Dare we prophesy that the few works of a spiritual character published by members of these over-the-border churches will be ranked with the classics of mystical theology? How can we account for the fact that none of these bodies have prospered? Why is it that not one has led a peaceful existence since it was formed? What are the reasons for most of them splitting up into rival litigious groups, each offshoot excommunicating the others sooner or later? Why has this process of spawning continued with slight variations of detail for more than a century? How is it that when some of these tiny churches have tried incorporation or intercommunion in the hope of survival, there has seldom been any lasting result? Christ indeed said, "There are many places in my Father's house." Was he picturing what can only be called the unsubstantial collection of spiritual places described in these pages? It must be confessed that most of them convey the impression of being built on sand, even if quite a number offer themselves as desirable residences with every modern convenience. Yet which of the founders whose lives have been recorded could be singled out as a wise man who built his house on rock? It would be hard to decide if anything has been gained in the long run by erecting between 1 and 200 detached or semi-detached autocephalous churches comparable to villas and bungalows, and so transforming the city of God into a nondescript caravan camp. If any of my readers are dissatisfied with the Holy Catholic Apostolic Roman Church, any of the Eastern churches either in or not in communion with the Bishop of Rome, the Anglican Communion, or the nearly 200 constituent bodies which make up the World Council of Churches, then they can take their choice of the substitutes offered them in these pages, of which there is indeed an embarras de richesse, enough to satisfy almost every taste. Having given this invitation, I will end this book by quoting a parable which seems applicable to the subject matter. Here is the sower gone out to sow, and as he sowed, there were grains that fell beside the path, so that all the birds came and ate them up, and others fell on the rocky land, where the soil was shallow. They sprang up all at once, because they had not sunk deep in the ground, but as soon as the sun rose, they were parched. They had taken no root, and so they withered away. Some fell among briars, so the briars grew up and smothered them. But others fell where the soil was good, and these yielded a harvest, some 100-fold, some 60-fold, some 30-fold. Listen, you that have ears to hear with. Matthew 13:3-9.